Hello cats and kitties, we're back with another true crime video. It's Terry Lee here and it's good to see you. I know it's been a while, but I have a fairly good excuse. I had a tear in my retina. Woohoo! That's nowhere near as painful as it sounds. It's actually painless, but it did make my vision go kind of wonky. I began to have a lot of floaters in my left eye. Basically, that looks like little pieces of string or little specks that are floating down in front of your eye. And my vision got kind of hazy. And when it did that, I was like, oh, that can't be a good idea or a good thing. So I went to the eye doctor. They found the tear in my retina. They tried the first time to fix it with a laser and it didn't quite work, so they tried a second time and that one was successful. I still am having some interesting vision issues, so reading my script might be kind of interesting today. So let's get to it. Gotta put on the glasses. Hopefully they'll help me be able to read. Who knows? All right, today, first of all, we're going to talk about what is a Bluebeard. Bluebeard is a character in a French story that kills his wives one after the other. So that became slang in crime for a man who kills his wives one after the other. So, what is a Lady Bluebeard? That's right. A Lady Bluebeard is a woman who kills her husbands one after the other. The goal for this, or the motive rather for this, is money, usually. Usually having to do with, that's right, life insurance, which is the motivation for all kinds of horrible acts against spouses. So today we're going to talk about Lyda Anna Marie Trueblood, and she was called the Lady Bluebeard. Now, I'm going to go on record and let you know that there are a lot of inconsistencies in this story. Different sources will tell different facts about different things, including her name. Trueblood is one of the names that she's listed under. Another name is Keller. So, hard to say. All right, so let's begin. Lyda Anna May Trueblood was born October the 16th, 1892 in Keedysville, Missouri, and I hope I pronounced that correctly. She was the third of 11 children of a deeply religious family. In 1906, the family moved to Twin Falls, Idaho. They bought a large tract of land and they started farming. Lyda was known as a pretty redhead who attracted boys like, and the quote here from the magazine article was, flies drawn to a honeypot. Nice. Some sources, as I said, listed her as Lyda Keller. I'm just not entirely sure which one is right. In 1912, on March the 17th at age 19, Lyda married Robert Dooley. And Lyda and Robert moved to Robert's ranch where they lived with Robert's brother Ed. In 1914, their daughter Lorraine was born. 1915 was a tragic year for the Dooley family. First, baby Lorraine died from drinking contaminated well water, according to Lyda. Now, here's another thing where sources differ. Some of my sources said that Lorraine did not die until she was 3, when Lyda was married to her second husband. But one of the primary sources that I found said that Lorraine died when she was a baby. Either way, she died too soon. In August of 1915, Ed Dooley, who is Robert's brother, died from a painful illness that caused cramps, nausea, and diarrhea. And his death was attributed to typhoid fever and drinking contaminated well water. His $2,000 life insurance payment was split between Robert and Lyda. 2 months later, Robert began to experience the exact same symptoms: cramps, nausea, diarrhea. Robert died on October the 12th, 1915, and his death was attributed to typhoid fever and from drinking contaminated well water. We're going to hear that a lot in this story, contaminated well water. Lyda was left with Robert's ranch and an insurance payout, which some sources said was between $5,000 and $7,000. So now at this point, with Ed's payout, she would have anywhere from $7,000 to $9,000, and she's going to have more because she is going to sell Robert's property. Less than 2 years later, in June of 1917, Lyda married William McCaffell, and with the money from the life insurance and the selling of Robert's property, they moved to Montana. In September of 1917, so just a few months later, William got sick. And guess what his symptoms were? Nausea, diarrhea, cramps. He died on October the 1st, 1917. His cause of death was said to be either influenza, because Spanish flu was actually rampant at this time in the United States, or diphtheria, and possibly complicated by drinking, that's right, contaminated water. And Lyda collected a $500 insurance payment from William's policy. In March of 1919, so not even 2 years later, Lyda married Harlan Lewis, who was either an automotive engineer or a car salesman. The sources differ on that. Something to do with cars, though. Lydia and Harlan were married 4 months before Harlan died. He had the usual symptoms of, say it with me now, cramps, nausea, and diarrhea, and also weakness. And his death was attributed to gastroenteritis, which is an infection of the gastrointestinal tract. And Lyda collected a $5,000 life insurance policy on this. So she has made anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 now on life insurance policies. After Harlan's death, Lyda moved back to Ohio, and she started going by the name Anna McCaffell, but we're still going to refer to her as Lyda. In Pocatello, Idaho, she met and married Ed Meyer, a ranch foreman. This is husband number 4, I think, if we're keeping score. Is it? I'm not sure. 3 or 4. Okay. She married Ed Meyer, like I said, who was a ranch foreman, and they married in August of 1920. By September 7th, 1920, Ed was dead. So virtually no time whatsoever. His death was listed as caused by diphtheria or typhoid fever, and he had experienced the usual symptoms of cramps, nausea, and diarrhea. Now, you're kind of wondering, is anybody not noticing that everyone that Lyda marries dies? Well, yes, someone was noticing that. Robert Dooley, Lyda's first husband, had a relative, Earl Dooley, who was a chemist, or we would say a pharmacist, in Twin Falls. And he grew suspicious of all the deaths of Lyda's husbands. Deaths seemed to follow Lyda wherever she went. And he and a local doctor suspected that Robert Dooley was poisoned, and they managed to convince the state attorney to exhume Robert's body. So they did that. They exhumed his body, and they found that there was enough arsenic in it to kill 5 men. Now, arsenic is a poison, or excuse me, well, it is a poison, but it's tasteless and odorless. So if you're being poisoned with it, it's almost impossible to know. It's also, the symptoms mimic many other illnesses. So when people die from arsenic poisoning, sometimes it's really difficult to see that that was the issue, that was the problem. So, yes, they found arsenic in Robert's body, and a warrant was issued for Lyda's arrest. No surprise there. But by the time the police got to her home, she was out of Dodge. She had fled. But while searching her home, they found a barrel full of fly paper, the sticky paper that you put out to catch flies. Well, here's an interesting little tidbit about fly paper. It contains arsenic. And if you boil fly paper, you can extract the arsenic from it. So that's an interesting bit of information to have. As the hunt for Lyda continued, the bodies of her other husbands and her daughter Lorraine were exhumed. The husbands' bodies had traces of arsenic in them, but baby Lorraine's body, the tests were inconclusive. So not sure whether or not she was poisoned with arsenic. Many people think that there was a good chance she was, but scientifically it was inconclusive. As part of the investigation, police found a druggist in Montana who remembered selling a large stock of fly paper to Lyda. So there you go. In May of 1921, 8 months after Ed Meyer died, Lyda was found in Hawaii. Well, there you go. She has married another guy. He has died with the same symptoms. And she has gone to Hawaii. She's fleeing the police at this point. And she has married husband number 5, for those of us keeping score. And that is a Navy man named Paul Southard. And sometimes when you look up Lyda to read her story, Southard is the last name that pops up. She was transported back to Idaho to stand trial for the murder of Ed Meyer, this ranch foreman that she had married, and oddly, she was not arrested for the murders of the other husbands or baby Lorraine. I can understand Lorraine because that was inconclusive. Not sure why she wasn't arrested for the other husbands, particularly Robert Dooley, since the investigation of his body started this whole thing. So I'm not entirely sure what was up with that, but all the sources that I checked said that she was standing trial for Ed Meyer's murder. So I don't know. Her trial began on October the 3rd, 1921, and it lasted for 6 weeks, and it was huge. It was a national sensation. Nobody had heard of a woman committing these kinds of acts, this especially murdering, 4 husbands. That was unheard of. The trial even made headlines in the New York Times, so it was national. Lyda was found guilty of second-degree murder. I'm not sure why she wasn't found guilty of first-degree murder. Maybe they couldn't prove in pre-planning. I'm not sure. But she was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 10 years, which doesn't seem like very much now, and it probably didn't seem like very much then. It might have had something to do with the fact that she was a woman. They tended to go a little bit more easily on women in the justice system back then, so that might have had something to do with it. But she was sentenced to 10 years in the Idaho State Penitentiary. While there, she developed a relationship with a prisoner named David Minton. And when David was released from prison, Lyda decided she wanted to be with him. So she wooed and charmed a guard at the prison and actually got him to look the other way when she had a saw and extra bed sheets smuggled into her. What did she do with that saw? She sawed off the bars of her window. Then she took the bed sheets and she made them into a ladder and climbed down from the window and escaped, and just like out of a movie. And she and David Minton were on the lam. They were on the run. But David would rat her out. And the reason that he would rat her out was that she left him when they got to Denver, Colorado. Now, why did she leave him? She left him so she could get married again. Because guess what? Paul Southard had divorced her during the trial, which is no great surprise. So she is now free to get married again, and she does. She marries husband number 6, Harry Whitlock. And she had actually gone to work for Harry. Harry was wealthy. He was a wealthy man. She had gone to work for him as a housekeeper. So they got married, and Harry took out a life insurance with Lyda as the beneficiary, as, husbands would tend to do. But Harry was spared. He was saved, and why was he saved? Because Lyda got wind of the fact that the police were on her trail. Now, I do not have dates for how long she was on the lam with David Minton and how long she was married to Harry before the police were out to get her and she was about to catch up with her. So I don't know exactly what this time frame is. But she fled from Denver to Topeka, Kansas. And Harry had the marriage annulled. So Harry got out alive, as did Paul, and they should both be thankful. Lyda was caught in Topeka. She was caught there, and she surrendered peacefully to the police, but she had drastically changed her appearance. She had dyed her hair black, and she had replaced her 2 front teeth with gold teeth, which I just find amazing. She was returned to the Idaho State Penitentiary, And while she was there, she thought she would try to get some special privileges by wooing the warden, kind of charming him. And apparently, she was really good at charming men. She's charmed all of her husbands. She's charmed the warden at Idaho State Penitentiary, or excuse me, the guard. And now she's charming the warden. In fact, she charmed the warden so much that he let her leave the penitentiary to go to movies, to go to a spa, and he even drove her to see her mother. That's just amazing. Lyda was paroled in 1941. I'm assuming she got some extra time from the, plus the 10 years for her escape. But she was paroled in 1941 and she was completely pardoned in 1943. So Lyda is a free woman with a free record. She married one last time, that's 7 for those of you who are keeping score, to a wealthy man named Hal Shaw. She became his housekeeper and then became married to him, and 2 years later, Hal disappeared. Now, we don't know if Hal was murdered. We don't know if Hal ran away. We don't know if Hal just left her. But Hal disappeared and no one saw him after that. So, who knows? Later, Lyda moved to Salt Lake City, Utah, and she became a housekeeper. And on February the 5th, 1958, while walking home from the grocery store, Lyda had a heart attack and she died. On an autopsy of her body, they found that she had no hair, no body hair. And that is actually indicative of long-term exposure to arsenic. So, interesting. Lyda was buried in Twin Falls, Idaho. And she was actually buried not too far from her first husband, Robert. And her tombstone reads Anna E. Shaw. So that is Lyda and her shenanigans, shall we say. Still would really like to know why she wasn't charged for the other murders. Why just Ed? Maybe because Ed was the last one, the most recent one. I don't know. I don't know. Again, arsenic back then was not something that was easily detected unless you were knowing to look for it. I believe now, can't they detect arsenic in hair? I believe they can detect it in hair now. So, and maybe that's how they did it back then. I don't know. But yeah, Lyda really got around, and almost everyone she came into contact with in any kind of close, intimate way wound up dying. So luckily for her last few husbands, they were able to escape that fate, with the possible exception of Hal. We don't know what happened to Hal. Hal could have just run and gotten out of Dodge. Maybe he heard what was going on with her other husbands. I don't know. Or maybe Hal was a victim too. It's hard to say. We also don't know for sure whether Lorraine was a victim or not. Her tests were inconclusive for arsenic. I would really like to think that as a mother, as being a mother myself, that her death was due to contaminated water, because it just blows my mind to think that a mother can kill her child. So I would like to think that that was actually an accident or an illness, but we just don't know. Well, guys, there it is. That's the story of Lyda. If you want to look up Lyda, her name is Lyda, Lyda. It looks like it should be Lyda, but I looked it up on the Google, and Google said that it was pronounced Lyda. So that's the way I pronounced it during this presentation. If you look her up, you might find her under any number of last names. Her surnames, as you know, she had many of them. I found her under Trueblood, Keller, and Southard. So there's 3 right there. You might find her under Shaw or McHaffle or Lewis. So it's hard to say. All right, guys, that's it for Miss Lyda. I hope that you enjoyed this. I found this one interesting simply because Lady Bluebeards, you don't really hear a whole lot about them now. Maybe you heard about them a little bit more beforehand. I know Belle Guinness was a serial killer. I don't know if she was a Bluebeard, but she was a serial killer. You don't hear a lot about women serial killers even now. Maybe I'll do the story of Bill Guinness. She's an interesting one from back in the day, from way back when. Sometimes I like doing the ones that are a little bit more historical. Proves that man has been crazy for time out of mind and can and will do evil things. So it's not just a modern thing that's happening now. We know more about it now because we have better detective work and better police work and uh, better CSI type things. All right, well, I hope that you guys are taking care of each other and taking care of yourselves and staying safe. And I will see you in the next video, which will be an ASMR video about what I have gotten recently from Ipsy and BoxyCharm. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.